Continuing V0 building adventures, the x-axis, the last unused linear rail and the last unused bearings. So first of all, let's take this part that should come on the edge of the extrusion. As you can see, there are two parts that will fit on top of the existing and installed linear rails with these 4 holes here, so they stay on top of the linear carriage, and these are the parts which will hold and which should be installed against the x-axis. I don't have an idea how this should fit together, but I suppose we'll find it out pretty much soon. First of all, let's do the usual threading and bearing stack assembly, and before we do that, we'll have to take these parts with 4 holes which fit the carriage and install threaded inserts. Exactly here and here you see bigger holes here which are diagonally spaced, so this is where the threaded inserts should go. So with the fun part, which is obviously putting in the threaded inserts done, let's take the boring part, which is building the stacks. And stacks are built on these parts. They're a bit different because this one has a cool huge hole here, this has a small hole here. Let's start with the one which has a big hole here, and let's orient it in a way that this protrusion, this tall part, is facing me. So first of all, let's put 2 25mm screws diagonally here and here, and let's orient it again so this tall thingy is facing me. And then I will have a left screw and a right screw. I should start building starting from the left screw, and the first thing I have to do is putting 2 washers, 2 spacers on the left screw here. Then I will put the standard 2 bearings forming the idler, and then I will have to put 2 more screws, 2 more shims, 2 more washers on the screw. And believe me, I hate these shims because they're just jumping around and they're really awkward to put in. And you know, I don't have the biggest fingers here. So again, 2 shims, bearings, 2 shims, and a spacer. And make sure you're holding the screws all the time with your fingers so they just don't fall off. The counterpart starts symmetrically, so you start with the spacer without any shims here. Then you put 2 shims, a bearing stack, and 2 more shims on top. The left one starts with bearings and then the spacer, the right one starts with spacer and then the bearing. So if I continue holding it like this, the matching part is one which has this edge adjacent to the stall part here. So this is the matching part, this is the no matching part. So let's carefully put the matching part here, make sure the screws got where they should be. Let's carefully turn it around and fix this together. When this is together and you have one free hand to turn it around, you have to install 1 more screw here in this hole, and this will be self-taping screw. So the smaller one, 10mm self-taping screw, and you will need a Torx screwdriver of an appropriate size to put it in. Not a Torx, sorry, Phillips, of course, P2. I'm using P2 here. Not sure this is the correct one, but it does the job. And let's build the second one. Again, take this part, take 2 25mm screws, put them diagonally here, turn it around so this tall part is facing you. Contrary to the first part, the left starts with a spacer. The second screw starts with 2 shims Take this top part, put it on top, align the screws, turn it around, fix the 25mm screws, and take a self-taping 10mm screws, sorry, one screw, and put it exactly into this hole here. All the extrusions that I have in my hand at the moment are basically, well, the same, so I can pick any of them, and I should install the last linear rail on top of them. Again, so this is a pretty ugly part when you have to take all the tiny M2 nuts and then put it into this spacer. And then make sure that they are aligned. Then attach the final linear rail here, again praying that all your nuts are aligned correctly and you're able to catch them. I need the linear rail to be spaced exactly 25mm from the edge of the extrusion, so I'm taking my calipers and I'm carefully pushing the linear rail to its place. 25mm, double check on the other side, 25mm too. So here I can tighten the screws, again not to over tighten them because you have a very fragile piece of plastic which you can easily break if you apply too much force. You will need, of course, again you will need to peel out some nuts. M3 nuts, 2 on each side of the extrusion, here, here and here. Then carefully turn it around and feed 3 more screws on the back of the extrusion. Side nuts should be aligned with these corners of the X frame, so I'm first of all turning it 90 degrees and aligning the nuts here. Then I'm installing into the correct position, so this is the one. I'm trying my best not to, well, misplace the screw, misplace the nuts when I'm doing that, and I'm putting 2 M12 screws here, hoping that they will catch the nuts. And I'm slightly fixing them. We don't want, of course, to fix them all the way because otherwise we won't be able to install the X part of the gantry. It will be just too tight. Repeating the same thing with the left part, but here I'm aligning only one nut. As you remember, there is a little bit of difference, and the right part of the gantry doesn't have the second hole big enough to fit the screw, so there is only one 12mm screw on the right side. Again, not all the way down, just enough to catch on. There are no block stoppers here, they just, well, the block just hits the carriage blocks. The bottom part is fixed with 2 6mm screws, and again I start by very carefully pushing nuts in their positions and then putting in the screws, hoping that, well, they will catch the nuts. 1, 2 here. Excellent. Now this is pretty loose, and this is what we want for the time of assembly. So the X-axis obviously should be fitted to these carriages on top of the printer. And this is as simple as just taking 2 6mm screws, these ones, and fixing them, well, using them to attach the X part to these carriages here. At this point the gantry, of course, is wiggly and wobbly, but we'll fix this right away. But before we do that, we have to do the magic of catching the last nut here, and this nut will secure this angle thingy, which will hold the M3 screw, which will be used to adjust the end stop position. So first of all, I'll need to make sure that the nut is under this hole here. This is pretty, well, this is not pretty. Pretty is the wrong word to describe that. And I'll have to use one M3 6mm screw to try to catch it. And yeah, and I succeeded, by the way. Though this is the point where it should be located. I'm pretty much curious why this gantry is all the way there. But whatever, I suppose a couple of millimeters lost here doesn't matter much. However, I would like, well, oh, okay, it was just too tight, so I'm centering it, or trying to approximately center that. And now I need to make sure that it's square and tighten the screws. So what do? I just push the gantry all the way back, so the X part all the way back, and I tighten the top screws. Simple as that. I need to also secure 2 screws on the bottom. You know that 6mm and 3 screws. So 1 and 2. And make sure that after all these manipulations, the X-axis can actually move all the way here and there. So yeah, it moves and it's square. Finally, it's time for the last 2 extrusions. They should be fitted here. But before we do that, we need again to prefit some M3 nuts, and prefitting here is simple. 3 nuts go in the outer part of the extrusion and 2 to the inner part. So 3 here, 2 here, and symmetrically here, 2 on the 3 on the outer part and 2 on the inner part. With the nuts done, I suppose you can just click the extrusion in. You might have foreseen the obvious next steps, which is, well, fixing the final extrusions, and this is done by using 10mm M3 screws, which you just thread in here and get into the thread inside the extrusions. Well, that's simple. Final check, does it move after all the, well, brute force and torture applied? Yes, it does. Here you have it, a cubic 0 of Voron, ready to be belted and ready for the electronic installation. The next part will be belting, and yeah, stay tuned. See you later.